Noon. Why don't we bring in two members who were there making up our political panel of the day. We're talking about the member for Fremantle, Labor MP Josh Wilson. Welcome back, Josh. And the member for Sturt, Liberal MP James Stephens. Welcome to you too, James. Good to have you both in the studio. Now, Josh, to you first of all on the pursuit of Katy Gallagher and to some extent other ministers as well today. Peter Dutton had told the party room meeting that I'm sure James attended earlier today, this was an open and shut case against Katy Gallagher, that she misled the Senate. Has that case been made, and do you recognise they're entitled to make that case in the interests of integrity and ministerial responsibility?
Well, it hasn't been made, and I think in all of this we've got to come back to what's at the heart of this matter. A young woman who was the victim of an alleged sexual assault in her workplace here in Parliament House back in 2019, a matter that wasn't dealt with well at the time, and in Ms Higgins' own version of events, she didn't receive the care and support that she should have had. It rolled on for 2 years and then came to light in 2021 and still wasn't dealt with well at the time. And in fact, the government of the day seemed mostly focused on its own political exposure.
Sure.
We had the Gaetjens report, which we still have never seen. So the idea, after all of that somehow Katy Gallagher is responsible is kind of ridiculous.
Well, not really responsible. The core allegation is that she misspoke or misled is the actual allegation, that she didn't characterise her prior knowledge accurately at a Senate hearing.
Well, I think even just in the way you formulate that, Greg, I mean, at the end of the day, we had an alleged sexual assault and all of the things that shone a light on, including some pretty severe shortcomings of the conduct of the former government, and the fact that it now turns into a pretty grubby and grasping attempt to make it Katy Gallagher's problem, I think is pretty ridiculous. And I would say just at this time when there are probably, well, almost inevitably people who have been victims of sexual assault who are triggered or traumatised by all this, that kind of ultra-political pursuit of a person is not helpful, and the distribution of private telephone messages is likely to have a kind of a chilling effect when we know there are already far too few women who feel confident enough to come forward with these kind of matters.
Yeah, a few ideas there, and we will come back to the leaks of subpoenaed material. But James Stephens, to you, I know you're not sort of personally directing the line of questioning that we're seeing in the Reps or the Senate, but as a backbench MP, are you entirely comfortable with going there? As Josh says, it does carry risk, doesn't it? The chilling effect, the trauma that it may lead other women to experience watching this?
Well, and that was a judgment that Labor chose not to make at the time when they were pursuing this and every political angle around it a few years ago. And what we're seeing is that Senator Gallagher at the time was very aggressive in her behaviour and prosecution around this. I think there is a significant question around the statements she made and the facts that have since come to light. She's had to obviously clarify a whole range of things in the Senate today, and it was the Labor Party that decided to politicise this. It was the Labor Party that decided they would bring this into the Parliament, even though it resulted in a criminal prosecution, and in my view, we shouldn't be litigating these sorts of matters. They are very serious, and we should give confidence to victims that there's a proper due process, which shouldn't involve them being dragged through the public domain. But Labor are the ones that opened this can of worms, and I think they're being caught out on it.
All right, well, based on that answer, can we take it that you're in agreement with Josh here on the publishing or the publication of subpoenaed court material that is never meant to see light of day when it's given to parties in these cases?
Well, indeed, and I'm assuming that, in fact, I think that is something that is going to be litigated in an appropriate way, and yes, I obviously don't support the misuse of those sorts of sensitive documents at all.
A matter for police, do you think, Josh?
Well, it's for the police to judge that, but potentially I think the Attorney-General addressed that matter today from a legal point of view. I wouldn't want to jump in with my own opinion.
No, he did so cautiously, and the ball is, as you say, in the Federal Police's court. We're just waiting to see what they might do with it. Why don't we move on to The Voice and yet another poll? We're talking about Resolve Strategic, finding that things are wobbly, particularly in respect of South Australia and Western Australia, your home states. Is it time to panic for those of you firmly in support of The Voice?
Definitely not. I mean, I think that no one should be complacent or have a particular expectation about a referendum outcome. They're very difficult to achieve, but I think there's reason to be optimistic because the case for change is right and just and sound. I mean, it's a simple thing to ensure that the oldest continuous civilization on the planet, which is our most precious heritage, is reflected in the Constitution, and that we do that through a voice that allows First Nations people to be heard and consulted on matters that affect them. It's a long way to go. We haven't yet passed the legislation through this place that creates the referendum, and I think for James and I, people who have been involved in campaigns, if someone was telling a political party that they need to be particularly concerned about a variety of polls 4, 5, 6 months out from the actual day, most of us would sort of be prepared to put that aside. And I note that there was one poll today that shows that it is a bit marginal. There's another one that shows that support is quite strong. Yeah,
no, that's true. And I suppose the whole point, James, no matter which side you stand on in the Voice debate, is that that's the whole point of campaigns, isn't it? To try and compress the field and get your campaign message shining through above all else. The race hasn't really started yet, has it?
No, but I think we are in a bit of a tragic circumstance, frankly, because we're seeing that this nation is completely divided on the question. Polls are showing the numbers, bouncing around, close to 50%. And I think what that means is even were this to succeed, it's not going to be a nationally unifying moment. And I think that is very disappointing. And but
that'd be true of all referenda, wouldn't it? If we were having one.
Not in 1967. That was more than 90% of people, and it was an important question that we wanted unity. And I think the cause of reconciliation is about unity, not division. And I think the government are putting us in a position where Australians are being torn apart over this issue because of a whole range of additional complexities that aren't necessary to achieve recognition. And look, I'm not supporting the referendum, but I'm not going to be delighting in a process that is going to leave, when it's unsuccessful, as I hope it will be, us dramatically set back because we've had a divisive debate when we could have had a unifying one.
I think you've made your position clear on the program. We've discussed it before. But on that narrow win thing, is it a winners are grinners, winners take all scenario? Or do you keep a mind, Josh, on what might happen the day after the poll if it's a line ball call?
Well, I mean, a couple of things just to pick up on what James said. I mean, I agree that we'd want as much unity around this as we could have. Any democratic process ought to include a range of views, and we wouldn't, if we had a situation where we were at 95% of support of anything, we'd probably be concerned about what was going on behind the scenes. So. Right. I guess I'd make a couple of points. One is that people who are in favour of unity can obviously be part of that if they want to, and at the moment the coalition is part of the political spectrum that itself is divided on this, and that's for them to consider. We had a change of government last year, and most people would agree it was a pretty clear judgment by the Australian people to have a change, as happens from time to time. One government ends, another government begins. That was decided on a two-party preferred basis, 52-48. There were 48 out of every average 100 Australians who would have preferred a continuation of the Morrison government, as bizarre as I find that to be. So I don't think people should be sort of, in addition to whatever position they hold, effectively running down or poisoning what might be a 55 or a 54 in favour across the nation. That in itself will be a strong decision in favour of a positive change.
Yeah, well, that's part of democratic maturity, I suppose. Why don't we move on to something that, again, unites both of you, and that is defence industry in this country. Bit of reporting out today, James, which as a South Australian might concern you, that there were debates behind the scenes as part of the Defence Strategic Review about discontinuing the build of Hunter-class frigates. Now, that's still unresolved, of course, because they're conducting a review. What are you doing to advance the arguments to keep that shipbuilding?
Well, you're right. That review recommended a review of surface combat vessels, and the major program is the Hunter program that's being constructed at Port Adelaide. So I'm extremely concerned because the leaks that are coming out at the moment, regrettably, in the past, where defence leaks, it tends to be a softening of the ground towards a decision that they're looking to make. You wouldn't see these sorts of reports in reputable media outlets if they weren't from sources that were designing them to soften people up for something, and I'm extremely concerned about it because there's going to be enormous economic impacts on my home state of South Australia if that program is curtailed in any way.
What if it was the right strategic call to make, though? That is to say, you went down the path of nuclear-powered submarines, and that particular type of frigate is not the type of surface ship that you want working alongside them.
Well, we certainly need frigates in the Navy, and as far as, you know, small design changes because of a different mix of capability, that's not what I fear is being contemplated here. There have been a lot of suggestions that the program has got some fundamental engineering challenges. We chose the Type 26. We've retrospectively sought certain capability. There's been weight issue, speed issue, range issue, and I'm just worried. I'm not capable of giving expert analysis on what capability we need, except to say that this decision was made many years ago, and I think we've got to stop making decisions and then abandoning them years later, going back to the drawing board and be left with nothing.
All right, well, there's been a lot of that, and we're still waiting the quick, short, sharp review, or whatever they call it. Josh Wilson, you've got your own doubts. I think you've put those on the record in the Parliament about nuclear-powered submarines under AUKUS, but how fundamental should the changes go in the surface fleet that accompany that?
Well, look, we need to get our naval shipbuilding program back on a better footing. The Defence Minister has made clear, and the Minister for Defence Industry has made clear that we're left with some issues to clean up. $90 billion of overspend and 100 years of accumulated timetable overruns. We've already delivered the DSR, the Defence Strategic Review, and I think it's sensible that there's now this short, sharp review of the surface combatant fleet and what it requires. But like James, I mean, I represent, my seat alone is a significant shipbuilding hub, and we'd like to see greater clarity around what will happen in future. I'm very heartened by the fact that the Minister for Defence keeps saying time after time that this government is committed to an ongoing, continuous shipbuilding program.
All right, well, there'll be plenty of eyes on that, and maybe we'll discuss it when we get the results through from the government. Josh Wilson, James Stephens, thanks again for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
Now we're going to go to our regular military analyst for afternoon briefing, Mick Ryan. He's been keeping a watchful eye on the offensives as they build up in the Ukraine war. We spoke to him a little earlier.